So, my name is Lynn. I'm Lynn Seraphin from Trentino Genealogy, and this is Philo Friday. It is Friday, the 1st of May, 2020. Happy May, everybody. We've made it through April, which was probably one of the hardest months for so many of us, and I'm really glad that we're all here. And yes, so the Philo, for those who are new or maybe watching this for the first time, or you just need a refresher, Philo is the practice of storytelling in Trentino where you share stories, usually between dinner and bedtime. And it's a way of bringing people together, preserving oral history, entertaining, staying warm, and all those kinds of things. And it's something that I thought I would do while we're all in lockdown, especially. So that's why we're here. And this week, I wanted to bring it back to, I've been talking a lot about history and kind of more technical things over the last few weeks, but I wanted to bring it back to kind of a place of storytelling and talk about a few legends. And it really depends on how much time I have tonight, because when I started researching the first one, I realized I actually had a lot of historical stuff to tell, and I'm not sure how long it's going to take. So what I might do, I was originally going to tell 3 legends, but I might end up telling one with more detail, and then save the other ones for next week. So that way you can kind of really bask in the idea of the first legend. So the first riddle that I gave this week, and that's what I'm going to be doing, talking about, let me look at how I worded it, was what centuries-old dramatic legend is still told about the spooky medieval Castel Restor, Castel Restor in Val Giudicarie. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Val Giudicarie is one of the valleys that is kind of southwest of Trento, north of Riva, so it's kind of in between that area. So it's slightly to the western part of the province. It's where my dad came from. And Castel Restor is right now it's a ruins. It's not like some big magnificent castle like Castle Thun or Castel Stenico or any of these other famous castles that some of you may have heard of. It is a ruins. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but there's an interesting legend about it that I wanted to share with you. But first I thought it would be it would give it more impact if you understood a little bit about its history. Now, first of all, nobody actually knows when it was built. It's that old. Nobody really knows when it was built. The first time it appears in documents is January 1265. That's the first time where a surviving document that we have where it's mentioned, and it mentions it's already in existence. So obviously it was built before then, but we don't exactly know when. But fair to assume built probably in the 1100s, 1200s, somewhere in there. Why is it mentioned in this document? Well, in that document, the Prince Bishop, remember if I've mentioned the Prince Bishops before, the Prince Bishop, and let me look up his name because I cannot remember it unless I look at it, Ignone Appiano, so he was the Prince Bishop. He gave a fiefdom, a feudo, a fiefdom, to one of the counts of Arco. His name was Federico d'Arco. And actually, the counts of Arco, even though Arco's in Trentino, they're actually based in Mantova, in Lombardia. And you can still see their big the house there where they were based. So the counts of Arco, it was given to this particular count, this area, this fiefdom. So in other words, he could collect taxes from there, and he owned the area. So it was his thing. Now, in the record that was given to him, it says, what I found really interesting is that it doesn't just say that he gets this fiefdom. It says that if the people of Bleggio, because this is the area that it was put in, what we call today Santa Croce de Bleggio, but just Bleggio or Blez, it used to be called in the past. If that area was threatened, get this, the count had an obligation to protect the people of Duvredo and Bergonzo and those villages that were surrounding that area by letting them come into the castle and bring their stuff, their furniture and things like that, and just protect it from invaders. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So what kind of invaders were they? Well, there were other counts who were vying for the area. There was a lot of battles going on with the counts of London and all these other things. So the other thing I found interesting is the name of the hill. The castle is built on top of a hill, and the hill is Dosso Vedova. Vedova means widow. So essentially, it means like Widow's Peak or something like that, which kind of makes me wonder why it was called that. I found that kind of an interesting little bit of trivia. So how many of you, there you go, thank you. Used to lecturing when you were in person only listening, yes, okay. So hi, Mary Kay, hi, Chris, hi, Marilyn, hi, everybody. Any of you ever heard of Castel Restor or been there? I just wanted to find out. So now, so that gives you an idea of where it was, like in 1265. It was that kind of thing. It was a feudal castle owned by the Counts of Arco, or given to the Counts of Arco, who, it was not a big grand castle, not like some of the bigger ones, was never a grand castle. It was more of a strategic place for, you know, people crossing through the valleys onto somewhere else. And so it was more of a strategic place and a safe place. So anyway, so blah blah blah. Right. So now I'm just looking at my notes. So tradition has it that during the 1300s, there were lots of clashes between the Counts of Arco, and there were a lot of people just battling in that area. In fact, the street that it was on used to be called the Strada dei Ladri, which means the street of thieves. So, and then in the 1400s, it was actually occupied by soldiers because it was during a war between Milan and Venice at that time. There was a big war going on, and so it was occupied for a time, and which I find kind of interesting because of where it is. And then eventually it was conquered and destroyed by the Counts of Lodron. And then in the 1500s to the 1700s, which is kind of where we're getting into where parish records are, it was rebuilt. But then by the time you hit the 1700s, it was turned into, get this, a hunting lodge. It was no longer a place for counts. They didn't really care about it. And by the year 1790, it was registered as destroyed. And today it is in ruins. It still was owned by the House of Arco for centuries, until the 1980s, in fact. But it was in ruins. It was just a pile of rubble. Finally, it was sold to the village. It was sold to the Comune of Bleggio, and it was excavated and fixed up for people to go see. Now, you can see it. It is in ruins. Now, I went there for the first time. It was open to the public in 2012. The first time I saw it was in 2014. Let me tell you where this castle is. I've put pictures of it online before. It's literally sitting at the end of the house where my father was born. It was sitting at the end of the garden of the house where my father was born in Duvredo. It's like you go to the end of the house where my father was born, you go to the end of their garden, there's the castle. There's a big gulch and then a big hill, and there's the castle. It's right there, and it's like a ghost castle. It's so spooky. Yes, you can climb the hill, you go up to it. It's great over a full moon. It's really eerie, but they also light it up at night. And whenever I come into Val Giudicarie, when I see Castel Restor up on that hill, even though it's just a kind of a big ruins, it fills me with a kind of excitement because there's something about it that's very vibrant, even though it's very old and in ruins. But my cousins still own the house, the Serafini house, and so I get to see it anytime I go there. So I find it quite cool. So now here's the legend, and you have to kind of place when the legend happened, and if the legend has some truth, it has to have happened before it was destroyed, and so I kind of would probably place it somewhere between the 1200s and the 1500s, somewhere in that period of time, because of the way the legend is told. So here's what it is, and there's many versions of it, but let's just have a feeling for it. I think you kind of find it interesting. There are several variations. I kind of like to pick and choose the bits that I like the best, but the thing they all have in common, the legend the common element, there are two common elements in all the legends, all the versions of this particular legend of Castel Restor. One is that they all have to do with something called Prima Notte, or sometimes called Jus Prima Noctis, which is, anybody know what that is? Prima Notte, anybody good in history? Have you heard of this before? I'll say it because I know there's a lag between my talking and your typing. So what it is the feudal right. This is an old medieval right of the lord or the count or whoever was in charge of the fiefdom. It was a right for him, supposedly, this is at least by legend, to have his pick of the village women. I thought you're going to be my, what? Okay, no, you guys are talking to each other. So there you go. I'll let you talk to each other. The count or whoever was the lord of the fiefdom would have his pick of the local women on the first night of their marriage. Actually, and it's called, yes, first night. Actually, the tradition was that he got them for 3 nights, for the first 3 nights of their marriage. Now, it didn't mean he went and did this all the time, but he had the privilege of doing, he had the right to do this. He could just go and take whatever women he wanted. And usually it had to do with on their wedding night. So this was kind of outrageous. And, you know, there are lots of legends around this kind of medieval practice. And I think, you know, you've read about these things in other books as well. But this one's specific to Castel Restor because apparently one of the counts of Arco, we don't know who because it's a legend and it doesn't say when and it doesn't give his name, just says the count, was doing this a lot. And he was especially preying upon the women in the village of Duvredo, which is where my father came from. Duvredo and Vergonzo are the 2 little villages right at the base of the hill. So they're the places where he was grabbing the women from. So the way the legend goes, the other thing that all the versions of the legend have in common is that, so you've got the villain, the evil count who's having his way with the women, and then you've got the hero. And the hero is somebody whose name is Painelli. Sometimes it says Painello, which is a first name, but most of them say Pinelli, which is actually a surname. It's a very old surname in especially Duvredo. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So I've read in some places that the Pinelli family had something to do with the castle. Perhaps they were, some of them were captains for the count, which in a way would kind of make sense in the context of this story, but I haven't seen it, I haven't heard it in context with the legend like that. But anyway, Pinellis have lived in Duvredo for centuries. And so they were right there, castle was right there. And so Pinelli is the standard character, just says Pinelli, doesn't say a first name. Furthermore, if it was long ago, it probably was just Pinello and not a surname. So, but anyway, he's the other constant. So you've got the villain and the Prima Notte and the hero, Pinelli, okay? So how it goes is this. Pinelli, he was, the count was threatening to take, we don't know from the stories whether it was Pinelli's new bride-to-be or whether it was one of Pinelli's daughters. We don't know because the legend doesn't go into that much detail. But the count was threatening to take one of them for his own pleasure. And Pinelli said, nope, I'm not going to have it. I've had enough of this. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to put an end to this. So what did he do? Well, there are a couple of different versions. I'm going to tell you the version of the story that I like the best because I think it's the most dramatic, and they reenact this quite a lot in the locality as well. Pinelli, decided to wait for the count. He knew the count was coming back from somewhere, and Pinelli sat by the side of the road. If you go and see the castle, you see the castle's on top of a hill, as all castles are, and there's this winding road going up, and Pinelli hunched down by the side of the road, and he had a scythe with him from farming, for threshing wheat, that kind of thing, a scythe. and which is also kind of, you know, what do you call it? Like you know, harbinger of death kind of thing. Anyway, he was hunched down by the side of the road, waiting for the count, waiting for the count. And finally, the count comes trotting along on his horse up the hill. And Pinelli leaps out all of a sudden, and with one swoop goes and takes off the count's head. Just takes off the count's head. That's what the story says, anyway. In one version of the story, it says that Pinelli did this so fast that the horse didn't even notice it. The horse just was unflinching and just kept ambling up the hill, walking up the hill with this headless count on his back. And the horse, by kind of automatic, you know, being used to it, just went up to the gates of the castle. The guys in the castle opened the gates, let them in, and it wasn't until they actually got inside the gates that they realized, oh my God, the count has no head. So, and that's when the alarm was sounded. Now, according to the legend, though, that was too late, because Pinelli, by that time, was gone. He had fled. So one legend says he ran off to Switzerland and was never seen again. Now, I have no idea how they would know that if he ran and wasn't found and never came back, but that's one version of the legend. Another version of the legend says that when he took off the count's head, he shouted, you know, in outrage that this is why he was doing it, and then he ran off. Another version of the legend says that he didn't actually behead the count. He went in the castle, which if they were connected to the castle in some way, that's a possibility. He went to the castle and hurled the count outside a window from the tower, went to the tower and threw him out the window in the tower and killed the count that way. So they I kind of like the one with the horse. I think the one with the horse going in, and you know, I think that's more dramatic. So that's why I like that one. And not because it's more violent, but because it's more dramatic. Anyway, all of these legends coexist simultaneously, and they still survive today. And there you can see the primary things are. It's got to do with the count, has to do with the castle, has to do with Pinelli, and the fact that Pinelli was never found. They say that in all of them. He was never found. He ran off and he was never held to justice. He left. So that means if he was just getting married, then he couldn't have been my ancestor because he's gone. So anyway, on that note about ancestry, yes, Pinellis were, let me see, did I tell all the versions? Yes. Pinelli, as I said, it's a very old surname in Duvredo. In fact, it only just went extinct. There was the last living Pinelli in Duvredo. The surname's not extinct, but in Duvredo it is. The last living Pinelli in Duvredo passed away only about 4 or 5 years ago. She was a lady, and she was 102, almost 102, and with her, the surname no longer exists in Duvredo. Now, the surname does exist with some of you who are descended from immigrants who left in the early part of the 20th century. I know a few Pinellis in the States because they came from Duvredo and that area a long time ago. So the name still survives, but not in Duvredo. It is now extinct. I'm descended from Pinelli, and in fact, anybody who has Serafini in their family, and probably a lot of other people from Bleggio, we're all descended from somebody named Painelli, because the Painellis married into the Serafini family when they started in Bleggio in the 1600s. So to me, when I hear this story, I think I don't know if this was an ancestor or not. It depends on the context. I don't even know if the story's true, but I'm sure if it is true, I'm sure it's somebody related to me, and I find that kind of interesting. So anyway, in the spirit of philo, I thought I would share that particular legend with you, because that is really what philo is about. It's about storytelling and preserving oral history through stories. And you can see bits of reality in all of it, even if some of it is very colorful and not quite true. You can see certain elements that have truth in them. And that's why they're legends, and they're, to me, part of our oral history. So do you know what? It's already going on almost half of the hour, so I'm not actually going to talk about the church mysteries tonight because I'm going to save those for next week, because those are longer, and I want you to mull over this story of Pinelli. And I'd love for you to think about what kind of legends have you heard about your ancestral homelands, and share them in the group. I think that would be really, really cool. Okay, I'm listening. Do I think this legend kept the castle from being maintained? No, it's got nothing to do with that. The castle was destroyed because of conflicts between the nobles themselves. I think, however, when we listen to legends like this, what we're seeing is the continual kind of preservation of the idea of the noble contadini, the noble farmers, the noble underlings who were defending themselves against the corrupt powers. That's what I see. There's a real cultural message going on in here. So it's deeper than just the surface of the story. So anyway, I hope that you liked that story. And next week I will tell you about the miracles, the miraculous mysteries around the Santa Croce, because that's very interesting, and it's too long to tell right now. It would take me another half an hour to give you the context of that and to tell you some of the legends. And it's not, I'm not going to be talking about the miracle healings, because I've mentioned some of those before in other calls. I'm going to be talking about the legends around the cross itself, and I think those are really also very interesting, and also very laden with symbolism. All of these stories are laden with symbolism, and I think you'll see that. So anyway, good night for now. Thanks for finding me. I hope you liked the story. Share other stories from your ancestors or your ancestral villages in the group, and I'll see you soon. Ciao, ciao.